Have you ever noticed how much longer it takes for the newest, the smartest AI models to actually think through a complex problem?
Yeah, it's definitely a noticeable pause these days. You can really feel the difference.
Right. You hand it a tough prompt like a logic puzzle, maybe a coding request or high-level math, and instead of just spitting out an answer immediately, it pauses. It generates these massive, sprawling chains of logic first.
Exactly. It is actively reasoning, it's showing its work.
Right, and while this step-by-step chain of thought reasoning is exactly what makes these new models so brilliantly capable, it also creates a massive, invisible traffic jam inside the computer's memory.
It really does. It creates a severe bottleneck that the entire industry is struggling with right now. I mean, we absolutely want the AI to show its work,
Yeah.
to logically step through the problem, but every single step it takes generates more internal data.
Which it has to hold on to, right?
Yeah, it has to hold on to all of that intermediate logic just to maintain the context of what it's trying to solve.
Which brings us to the mission for today's deep dive. We're exploring a brand new, state-of-the-art foundational generative AI paper titled ReasonAlloc.
And this is a heavy-hitting collaboration.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
We're talking researchers from Tsinghua University, City University of Hong Kong, Peking University, Shenzhen University of Advanced Technology, and the Chinese Academy of Sciences. It's a massive effort.
It is.
And the mission of this deep dive is to look at how these researchers essentially solved that traffic jam. They figured out a way to make an AI think just as hard, with all of that complex logic, but using only a fraction of the memory.
Which is really the holy grail for generative AI right now, because if you can solve that memory traffic jam, you can suddenly run incredibly smart, massive reasoning models locally.
Like on your own devices.
Exactly. You can run them on smaller devices, you can run them much faster, and servers can handle vastly more user requests at the exact same time.
Okay, let's unpack this. Before we can appreciate the genius of how they fixed it, we need to understand what this memory bottleneck actually is physically doing to the machines. Because, we hear a lot about raw compute power, right? But this paper focuses entirely on a specific memory structure.
Right, the KV cache.
Yeah.
The KV cache, or key value cache, is essentially the model's short-term working memory. When a model is generating an answer, it does so one token at a time.
One piece of a word at a time.
Exactly. And to figure out what the next word should be, it has to constantly look back at the entire context of what it just wrote, plus everything you asked it in the original prompt.
Right.
So to do that without recalculating the entire history of the conversation from scratch for every single new word, it stores those previous mathematical computations in the KV cache.
I like to think of this KV cache like a chef's kitchen counter.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, like if you're cooking a simple grilled cheese, you just need a cutting board and a knife. You have plenty of room. But if you're cooking a massive 10-course meal, which is the equivalent of our long reasoning task here, you keep pulling out new ingredients, new prep bowls, new whisks.
And you just leave them out.
Exactly. You just keep putting them on the counter because you might need them again later. Eventually, the counter is so completely cluttered that you physically cannot cook anymore. You have absolutely no space to chop the next onion. You just hit a wall.
That visual perfectly captures the mechanical limitation we face. In reasoning models generating these massively long chain of thought trajectories, that kitchen counter fills up incredibly quickly. The memory demand grows linearly.
Bowl after bowl.
Right. Every new token adds another bowl to the counter. And very quickly, it bottlenecks the GPU memory. It forces server systems to drastically reduce their batch size.
Wait, what does that mean in practical terms?
It means they might only be able to handle, say, 2 user requests at once instead of 20, and it heavily slows down the overall throughput of the system. So to keep cooking, to use your analogy, the AI system has to start throwing things away. It has to clear the counter.
And that is what the incumbent solutions are trying to do, right? The methods that people in the field are already using, like a SnapKV or RKV.
Yes, those are token eviction methods.
Right. They look at the cluttered counter and try to compress the cache by just throwing away the ingredients they assume you probably won't need again.
But this raises an important question. How do those incumbent methods decide what to throw away? And more importantly, how do they distribute the remaining counter space across the different parts of the AI's brain?
Because it's not all just one big blob.
Exactly. The fatal flaw in these current eviction methods is that they assume a completely uniform budget.
Meaning they give every part of the AI the exact same amount of memory.
Precisely. Neural networks are made of different layers, and within those layers are different attention heads, which are the specific mechanisms hunting for patterns and connections. The current eviction methods look at all those layers and heads and give every single one of them the exact same memory budget.
It's just a flat, uniform distribution.
Yeah, a flat distribution. But that doesn't reflect how an AI actually processes a complex problem.
It assumes the AI is thinking equally hard about everything, all the time, which, just isn't true. But the researchers of ReasonAlloc didn't just guess where memory was actually needed, right? They rigorously measured it.
They did.
They profiled models like DeepSeek R1 Distill Llama 8B and Qwen 14B across a ton of different tasks, and they discovered that AI reasoning actually has a distinct physical shape.
And what's fascinating here is their methodology. Instead of just looking at average token counts, they measured the raw physical token demand required to preserve 93% of the model's attention mass.
Okay, let's break that down. Attention mass. Meaning they wanted to figure out how many tokens you physically need to keep on the counter to capture 93% of the actual important focus of the AI.
Right. They isolated the essential reasoning tokens from the long tail of useless data.
Did they trim the fat?
They did. And when they mapped out where that essential attention mass was concentrated across the different layers of the model, they found what they named a reasoning wave. Yeah, it is a highly nonlinear curve. AI thought processes happen in 3 distinct phases. First, in the shallow layers, the early layers of the model, there is incredibly high demand for memory.
Okay.
The model needs a massive budget here because it is performing broad-spectrum semantic perception. It's anchoring the global context of your prompt.
Got it. So it's like reading the whole recipe, checking the pantry, and getting the lay of the land before it starts actually cooking.
Perfect analogy. Then, as you move deeper into the middle layers of the network, the memory demand actually drops significantly, and it starts oscillating in this rippling pattern.
Why does it drop?
Because this is where specific localized logic happens. The model no longer needs the entire global context. Specific reasoning heads are just executing isolated logical deductions, step by step.
Okay, so a massive spike at the start, dropping down into a ripple in the middle.
Right. And finally, in the deep layers, right before the model is about to actually generate the final output word, there is a sudden, massive spiking demand for memory all over again.
Another spike.
Yeah. The model requires a budget surge to perform a holistic verification over the entire reasoning trace it just spent all that time generating. It checks its own work.
Wait, I have to push back on something here.
Sure.
I would assume a complex math problem requires a totally different thought process than, say, a coding problem or just writing a really long essay. Why would this wave look the same across different tasks? Wouldn't the AI's brain light up differently depending on what you asked it to do?
It's a great question, and honestly, most researchers in the field assumed exactly what you just said. But the empirical measurements proved otherwise. When they ran the numbers, the cross-task variation was incredibly small.
Really?
Yeah. The layer-wise budget proportion is almost entirely task invariant. The shape of the reasoning wave isn't dictated by the task the AI is solving. It is dictated by the underlying architecture of the model itself.
Wow, so the physical wiring of the AI forces a specific template of thought, whether it's doing calculus or writing poetry?
Particularly in these modern models that have been distilled using chain-of-thought reinforcement learning, they converge on a standardized thinking template. But crucially, different model families have completely different wave shapes.
Okay, give me an example.
For example, the Llama 8B architecture has an overwhelming initial memory spike at those early layers. It demands a ton of context up front. But the Qwen 7B architecture shows a much more gradual decline, relying far more heavily on the mid to late layers for its processing.
So the brand of the brain changes the waves, but not the task.
Exactly. The cross-architecture variance was measured to be nearly 4 times larger than the cross-task variance.
Okay, but if that wave shape is permanently baked into the Llama or Qwen architecture, that means we don't have to guess what it needs in real time. We can map it out before we even hit generate.
That is the exact logical leap the researchers made. And it leads to the first fix in the ReasonAlloc framework. Offline layer-wise pre-allocation.
Offline pre-allocation.
Yes. Because the reasoning wave is stable and architectural, they perform an offline calibration. Before you ever run your complex prompt, the system maps out the specific wave for the model you are using. Then it assigns a customized, stable memory budget to each layer that perfectly matches its natural wave shape.
But they don't just hand over a blank check to the demanding layers, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if the early layers are incredibly greedy, wouldn't they suck up all the memory and starve the middle layers?
To prevent exactly that, they implement a mechanism called power smoothing.
Power smoothing.
Think of it like a progressive tax bracket for memory. The raw demands of those early layers are highly heavy-tailed. They want almost everything. So the system applies a mathematical formula that gently shrinks the budgets of the greediest layers.
Okay, so it taxes the rich layers.
Right. It clips the allocations so no layer gets less than 25% of the average budget, and no layer gets more than 200%. It dampens the extreme spikes but preserves the necessary curve, guaranteeing that those middle layers always have enough resources to execute their localized logic.
That is brilliant. Okay, so fixing the macro level budget for the layers makes total sense. We've matched the wave. But the paper doesn't stop there. As we zoom into a single layer, it reveals that there is absolute chaos among the individual attention heads operating inside it.
The disparity is staggering. We call it intra-layer head skew. Within a single layer, you might have one reasoning critical head that requires nearly 500 tokens of memory to function properly. But an adjacent head, sitting right next to it in the exact same layer, might need fewer than 50 tokens.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Think about this like a professional basketball team. You have a star player who is carrying the entire offense, and you have a bench warmer who is just filling a roster spot.
Right.
If you force uniform memory budgets on your AI, which again is what the incumbent models do, you are, as a coach, forcing your star player and your bench warmer to play the exact same number of minutes. You are starving the star player of the court time they need to actually win the game, and you are wasting valuable minutes on someone who isn't contributing to that specific play.
It is a devastating waste of resources. You are filling the KV cache with redundant data from the bench warmers. And unlike the macro layer budgets, which are stable and can be mapped offline, the utility of these individual heads shifts rapidly and unpredictably during live generation.
Wait, unpredictable how?
Well, a head that is completely useless on token 100 might suddenly become the most critical head in the entire network on token 500.
Oh, so you can't map the players offline. You need a coach that adapts on the fly.
Precisely. And that leads to Tier 2 of ReasonAlloc. Online headwise routing.
Online routing, okay.
Instead of a static assignment, the system pauses every 128 steps of generation and acts as a dynamic router. It evaluates all the attention heads within a layer by pooling their scores. And it doesn't just look at how active they've been, it introduces a penalty for redundancy.
So it wants fresh ideas.
It actively favors diverse, novel information. Based on those scores, it calculates a global threshold and dynamically reallocates the layer's memory budget to the specific heads that need it right in that exact moment.
But wait, I have another question. If a head loses all its memory because it's temporarily useless on token 100, doesn't it just die? Like if it forgets all its context, how would it even know it's supposed to be important again at token 500?
That is a brilliant observation. You are identifying a very real phenomenon known as the starvation loop.
Starvation loop?
Yeah. If an attention head is stripped down to a near-zero budget, its ability to score future tokens collapses. It essentially goes blind. Because it scores poorly, the router gives it zero budget again on the next pass, and it permanently dies.
Yikes. So how do they fix that?
To prevent this, ReasonAlloc implements what they call a shared robustification operator.
Let me guess, it's a hard safety net.
Exactly that. It is a minimum floor. No head is ever allowed to drop below 25% of the baseline uniform budget.
Oh, it's the minimum league salary for the bench warmer. You give them just enough practice time so they stay familiar with the playbook, just in case you need to call them up in the fourth quarter.
I love that, yes. It ensures that the essential context structures are preserved across all heads, preventing representation collapse. The system maintains a baseline awareness everywhere, while still dynamically routing the vast majority of the KV capacity to the heads that are currently information-rich.
Okay, so we have the theory down. It's a dual-tier system. The macro level matches the architectural reasoning wave with offline pre-allocation and a progressive tax. And the micro level dynamically routes memory between the heads every 128 steps, constantly shifting resources to where the active logic is happening. Now, we need the proof. Does this actually prevent the AI from losing its train of thought when the server memory gets incredibly tight?
The benchmark results are genuinely remarkable, particularly under severe memory constraints. They tested this heavily on the Math 500 benchmark and the AIM 2024 benchmark.
And just for context, these are not simple Q&A tasks.
No, not at all. They are rigorous, multi-step mathematical deduction problems that require really long chains of thought.
And how tight are we talking with these memory budgets during the test?
Extremely tight. Budgets of 128 to 512 tokens.
Wow.
For context, these reasoning models might normally want to generate and store thousands of tokens to solve a single problem. On the Math 500 benchmark, locked at a 512 token memory budget, the baseline SnapKV method, which relies on that uniform static budget, completely unraveled. It hit only a 63.6% accuracy.
Yeah, so it failed a lot.
Yeah. The standard RKV method fared slightly better at 76.4%. But ReasonAlloc dominated the field, hitting 82.5% accuracy under the exact same tight memory constraints.
That is a massive jump in capability just from managing the traffic jam better. And looking at the paper, it's not just more accurate. The resource logistics make the system blisteringly fast.
Yes, the speedups are incredible.
Like at generation lengths of 16,000 tokens, ReasonAlloc achieved up to a 5.52x throughput speedup over an uncompressed model.
It's huge.
By keeping the memory footprint surgically small but highly effective, the servers could sustain a batch size of 8 instead of being forced to drop down to a batch size of 2.
And the economic implications of that throughput increase are profound. For anyone trying to deploy these models in the real world, being able to serve 4 times as many users simultaneously on the exact same hardware is a complete game changer.
So what does this all mean? The numbers are impressive, but how does this actually look in practice? When the AI fails due to a memory bottleneck versus when it succeeds with dynamic routing, what is physically happening in the output?
The researchers provided a phenomenal case study directly from the AM 2024 benchmark to illustrate the mechanics of this exact scenario. It involves problem 11.
Okay, let's walk through it.
The problem asks the AI to find the number of ordered triples of non-negative integers that satisfy a set of complex equations. The AI starts churning along, generating its chain of thought.
Doing its thing.
Right. It correctly does some algebraic substitution, and about halfway through its reasoning, it derives a vital constraint equation. P equals 100Q minus 2 Milton.
Okay, so P equals 100Q minus 2 Kevins.
That specific equation is the algebraic bridge. If the model loses those coefficients, it is mathematically impossible to solve the rest of the problem.
Let's look at the failure state first. The baseline model using a uniform eviction strategy is working through the problem. But because it is giving equal memory to all those useless benchwarmer heads, the cache rapidly fills up. The system taps the AI on the shoulder and says, hey, we're out of space on the counter, you have to drop something. And because it isn't prioritizing the attention mass properly, it evicts that constraint. The P equals 100Q minus 2 Wilson equation from its memory entirely.
It literally forgets the most important architectural pillar of its own logic. And you can watch the collapse happen in real time in the generation text.
It's wild to read.
It is. The AI writes, let me divide both sides by 3 to simplify, that's a cubic equation. It realizes it needs to factor a polynomial, but it no longer has the constraint.
So what does it do?
It starts wildly hallucinating fake rational roots. It starts guessing 100, guessing 120, just trying to force the math to work. Eventually, it gives up on the logic entirely and falls back on blind brute force guessing, spitting out a final answer of 7.
Which is completely wrong. Now compare that to the success state using ReasonAlloc on the exact same problem with the exact same memory constraints. The AI generates the same bridge equation, P equals 100Q minus 2 Milton. But as the context grows and the memory gets tight, the dynamic router goes to work. It sees that the specific layers and heads holding those polynomial coefficients are highly active and critical to the current logical step.
It actively routes the memory budget to protect those specific tokens. It starves the irrelevant, redundant heads to ensure that bridge equation stays safely on the kitchen counter.
And because it actually remembers the equation, the generation text is a totally different experience. The AI writes, substituting P into the cubic equation, therefore the cubic factors as x minus 100.
Right, it has the math right there.
It successfully derives the general form, doesn't hallucinate a single fake root, and nails the correct answer, which is 601.
It is a perfect, isolated demonstration of the KV cache compression bottleneck in action. Without those critical bridge tokens, the model's entire logical structure collapses into hallucinations. By dynamically routing the budget to protect the structural integrity of the thought process, ReasonAlloc allows the model to maintain its logical chain over a massive context window.
This highlights the true value of what these researchers have built. I mean, ReasonAlloc is a plug-and-play training-free upgrade.
That's the best part.
Yeah. You don't have to spend millions of dollars retraining a massive neural network from scratch. This framework just wraps around existing token eviction policies. It proves that the path forward isn't necessarily just building infinitely larger, more expensive supercomputers to run smarter AI.
No, sometimes we just need to be smarter with the resources we have.
Exactly. Sometimes we just need to distribute the memory to match the exact physical shape of how the AI actually thinks. This brings us significantly closer to a world where you can run massive, highly capable reasoning models locally, like on your own laptop or phone, without them instantly crashing or forgetting what they were doing midway through a task.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this paper represents a major paradigm shift in how we approach efficiency. For a long time, the central question in AI compression has always been, which tokens do we delete?
Right.
ReasonAlloc changes the question entirely. It asks, how do we dynamically route our limited resources to support the physical structure of the model's logic? It treats memory as a fluid, logistical resource rather than a static grid.
We started today by talking about that invisible traffic jam of memory. But looking at the mechanisms we just unpacked, it leaves me with a lingering thought. Yeah. If a model's underlying architecture rigidly dictates the physical shape of its reasoning wave, meaning the topographical map of its memory demands looks exactly the same, whether it's solving a complex algebraic constraint or writing a sprawling fictional story, what does that tell us about the ultimate boundaries of artificial thought?
That is a deep question.
Maybe we aren't just clearing a traffic jam in a server rack. Maybe we are finally learning how to read the topographical map of a completely alien landscape. Something for you to ponder on your own as you watch these models get smarter.